A soft boom sounded from somewhere inside. "Okay," he whispered hesitantly, "but be ready to run when I say run. Deal?" A second boom followed. "Deal," I muttered. "I'm the oldest," he insisted. "We don't know what we're going to see inside there. You have to listen to me." "Shut up and let's go!" We hopped out of the car and ran across the empty lot. Rain and heavy wind swooped in with our arrival. Mark slipped and fell into a particularly nasty pool of blood. I raced back to help him. By the time we both made it inside, our parents were gone. We looked around for a minute. The store seemed to be shelled. Overturned shelves made it difficult to get around. Smeared floors made the entire place stink worse than a slaughterhouse. At the center of the store was a staircase that leads to the basement level. Normally, larger items like water jugs are stored down there. We got the distinct feeling that we weren't totally alone, because we could hear some kind of movement in that area, so we moved towards it. Mark found some cover behind a blown-out register. We used it to peek downstairs. An enormous pit sat below us. We couldn't actually see where it ended. Mark picked up a can and dropped it. 10 to 15 seconds later, it made contact with the bottom. The closer we inched toward the center, the more that movement seemed rhythmic, almost pulsing like a heartbeat. We heard footsteps. Mark ripped my collar and pulled me back. Approaching the center of the store were a man and woman who both looked familiar to me from different places. That was my first thought, that they must be together without me realizing, and that it really is a small city after all. The couple walked up casually to the edge of the pit. They looked at each other and smiled. Then they jumped, hand in hand, as if expecting to land in a ball pit. The splat came after the boom. The store grew quiet. Something seemed to be slurping down below. "What?" Mark whispered. "You don't think..." "It drinks the blood." Suddenly, the pulsing grew louder. Horrible scraping ripped somewhere below it. I can't adequately describe the sound, almost like a giant moth breaking its way out of a cocoon. A familiar rhythm to the din took over. "Checking for weaknesses," Mark muttered, "even at birth." "Time to go," Mark shouted. "Definitely," I answered. Each of us put in our best track performances to date. The building gave way as if an earthquake was underneath it. We skidded out of the entrance just as the overhang dipped down to smash the carousel door. My brother got to the car before me. He jumped into the driver's seat, and thank God the keys were still in the ignition. He smashed the gas and all but left me with the passenger door popped open. I hopped in at the last possible moment. The store collapsed behind me. Mark doesn't know shit about driving, and neither do I, but any idiot can hit the gas and steer away from an explosion. We picked up speed while debris rocked the car. Just as we got back on the road, Mark pointed into the rear view, and I wish he didn't. Standing in the wake of the grocery store was a creature 3 times its size. I didn't look at it twice. We managed to drive to the gas station before nightfall. We found it pretty much untouched. I don't think anybody else made it that far. We took the mountain road into the next town and drove past sundown. We are safe and sound now in a place called White Valley. The people here are friendly, but none of them, including the sheriff, can tell me a damn thing about Fullerton or what happened to it these past few days. Go figure. I hope more than anything that this post can help drive more survivors out of the woodwork. Please, message me if you or someone you know lived through the attack on Fullerton City. I can't overstress the importance of that plea. We cannot let our town be forgotten. One day, we will go back. I don't care if it's just Mark and me. I know we can find the entrance the same way we found the exit. We don't expect to find anybody alive. That's just hope that's not worth having. But we all have a right to know what is living there instead. Signing off for now, Matt. Sometimes I find it hard to believe that I've been an internet user for 20 years now. That's older than some of my coworkers. It's over half my life. And still, the internet feels like the new thing. I used to take it for granted, like we all do, but at least I remember what it was like when it wasn't there. When you had to leaf through an encyclopedia set to find an answer. When you could only find Gillian Anderson's pictures in magazines. Or later, when songs took 30 minutes to download and full-length movies were almost impossible to find because no one's hard drive could hold them. First getting online was super exciting. I mean, the first time I did it without supervision. Because I knew I had anything at my fingertips. I could type it into good old Lycos, one of the many pre-Google search engines, and there it would be. I was interested in naked celebrities and the paranormal back then. I was only 13, give me a break. I was so interested in the paranormal, I built a Fortune City free homepage all about the occult and the X-Files. I linked it to the darknet web ring, where all the best dark websites and homepages came together. Pages on spell books, goth babes, the occult, dark art, and a gross-out page or two. It was through the web ring that I met Angelica. Angelica hosted a Wiccan GeoCities or tripod homepage that I found particularly alluring. No, wait, it was Angelfire. She just made the best of some cool animated GIFs, MIDIs, and frames. Amazing stuff at the time. Just like her, the page was creative and attractive, but also simple. The reason I bring all of this up is because she suddenly contacted me just a few weeks ago by email, asking,
"What's been happening?"
A catch-up question. We had almost 20 years of catching up to do, and this is pure Angelica. She signed the emails with her ICQ contact. I enjoyed the quaint touch. It'd be like someone in the 90s sending a letter with a wax seal, right? I replied back with a summary of how my life had gone over the past 18 years or so since I'd last communicated with her. 18 years makes you think. She shot back a response almost immediately, asking for details. We exchanged a few emails this way. I was pretty excited to come home from work and write to her, actually. Nothing romantic, it was reconnecting with my past. It's a strange but addictive feeling. Soon I started to notice something just a little off. She never really answered anything about herself. She ignored my suggestions that we text or talk on the phone. All she wanted was to know more about me. It got me wondering, like maybe she's dying and just doesn't want to say. So I asked her. I asked why she wasn't sharing and if there was something I should know. I started reading over her previous messages for clues, and I noticed something that didn't occur to me at all until then. Her email address was at globetrotter.net. That may not mean anything to you, but it struck me as strange. You see, Globetrotter was a Canadian ISP way back in the mid-90s. I didn't even realize they still hosted. I know a lot of people still have their old email addresses for sentimental value and all, but it's like she was purposefully trying to be old school. Something about it creeped me out, like she was trying too hard to make me feel nostalgic or something. Again, I didn't have to wait long for her reply. Oh, she didn't answer my questions. She asked me,
"Hey, do you remember the hole?"
I didn't know why then, but the moment I read that sentence, I felt uneasy, like I was being watched. I had a hazy sense that I'd dreamed about something called the hole once. Whatever it was, I was instinctively repulsed by it. I couldn't remember anything solid, though. In my head, I went over IRC rooms, websites, news groups, web rings, all the old internet stuff, and came up empty. She sent me another email before I could even reply.
"You really don't remember? The hole was our little secret. Not many knew about it. Even fewer how to find it. But we found it. It was right there all along. Sometimes when you'd load Darknet and Netscape, there'd be a tiny black dot in the bottom left corner. In all this blank space. You had to hover over it exactly and click it. Then you'd be there. You'd be in the hole. You remember it now, don't you?
She was right. I did. I just didn't remember ever calling it the hole. What I remembered was that secret little space we found. I remember it was like the browser didn't see it as a real website or something. There wasn't even an address to copy and paste from the bar. It was just the letter M. I tried everything to pin it down to an IP, but M was all I could ever find. Another thing I remember is that I never liked that place, not at all. There was nothing there, it was all empty. I remember being excited the first time we found it because it was something hidden and it felt like somewhere we shouldn't be. Then I hated it because it was just empty. And it made me feel bad and empty. Not boredom, like it wasn't supposed to be there or anything, wasn't part of anything. I wrote Angelica back telling her I wasn't interested in talking about that. I didn't hear back from her that night. That was unusual. She normally replied right away. Eerily fast, I realized while mulling it over. It was like she already had her answer typed out, and it didn't matter what I actually said to her. Now that I was waiting for a response, because this whole thing had me inexplicably shaken up, of course she didn't reply. The next day, when I got home from work, an email was waiting. She said,
"We were missing so much. The hole has so much for us to discover. So many secrets. You could just keep going and going. It's like an endless puzzle. Everyone else stopped at the first layer. You remember that, right? I just knew there had to be something else in it. I knew no one would create and hide it for no reason. I kept going back to it, looking closely until I discovered how to go deeper. And I kept going. It's still there, you know. It's not too late. The web ring is gone. Netscape is gone. But the hole is still there for you."
I felt a strange chill down my spine that I brushed off as nerves. I was up for a promotion and a little stressed after all. Then I started to wonder if she was pranking me. Angelica wasn't really a humorous girl. She'd laugh at your jokes, but she didn't really make her own. In fact, something about her earnestness was really disturbing. I didn't reply to her right then. I decided to run some checks on her because things just weren't adding up. I started with her email address to see if she'd been posting anywhere. I was searching for a while before I hit something. I didn't find any forum posts or websites or anything like that. What I found was her email host, Globetrotter, had stopped hosting 11 years ago. The email address she was writing from was impossible. Now I knew something was wrong with her, if it really even was Angelica. I mean, why would she go through so much trouble to create a fake email address that mirrored whatever email address she would have been using in the 90s? That wasn't just quaint anymore. Also, we hadn't talked in 18 years. Why did she suddenly want to reach out to me, and why just talk about some long-forgotten website? Because I felt like that's what she was building up to all along. The more I thought about it, the more weird it seemed. I should have just ignored her and went on with my life, but I wanted to know what was going on. I kept digging around. I used her ICQ number, her name, the state I believed she lived in. I could find no record of her doing anything after her Angel Fire homepage. No Facebook, no Google+, not even MySpace. It's like her presence on the internet actually was in the 90s. Like she disappeared completely, waited in hiding for almost 20 years, then reappeared just to talk to me about an old website. The whole thing was bizarre. I started having trouble sleeping. I was having nightmares about staring into a monitor, not able to move. There were computers all around, and I was concerned about the beehive in the corner. After that, I went a week without sending her an email or her sending me one. I felt guilty about it, but I had every right. I knew I'd regret it if I sent her another email, and it seemed like she took the hint at first, until a new email came in. This one was short and to the point. It read,
"I think I'm coming to the center. You could spend your whole life here."
I remember these words exactly. Oh, yes, because whatever the hell they meant, the way she said them, so real and urgent, was really upsetting. I didn't dare answer her. Another week went by before I got another email. This one was a different kind of email. This one didn't even have an email address. That was spooky enough in itself. It gets worse. The text read, "Don't trust emails. Not from good place. Delete and forget." It wasn't signed. I figured it had to be Angelica. It just wasn't her style. Not long after, I received another email from Angelica with instructions of where to go looking for the hole. A place on archive.org on their Wayback Machine still had the dot to click on. That was the only way in, she said. It had to be the dot. I thought about going to check it. I would have, except I was afraid of it. I couldn't remember what happened to me with that site, but I knew there was something bad about it. Then another email came from the blank email address. In the body, just the link to a Gopher site. Now, I hadn't seen a Gopher site in a good 15 years. I had to download an old browser just to access it. If you weren't on the internet back then, Gopher sites just housed a bunch of text files and folders usually. You'd go to gopher://blah-blah-blah.com. They were usually run by universities. This particular Gopher site only had a few files, all audio files. I listened to them all. They had different file names, but they were the same. The muffled sound of a boy's voice saying, over and over. I was shaking. I got the police involved this time. They thought I was being pranked. I asked them if they could at least look into Angelica. I told them all I knew about her. The only thing I didn't tell them is who I thought the voice was. I know it's crazy, but the reason I didn't tell them is that I'm pretty sure it was my voice when I was a boy. I stopped receiving emails from Angelica in the blank address after that. I hoped it was over. I think a good month passed before anything else happened. I got the promotion, and things were feeling normal. I told myself some secrets are best left secrets. Well, I got a large manila envelope in the mail, no return address. I went against my gut and opened it. Inside was a printout of all the correspondence with Angelica. All of it. Not just the new stuff, emails I'd written her back in the 90s. I took the stack of papers to the police. This was evidence. They told me that they still thought it was a sick prank. That struck me as odd. I asked them, but why sick? That's when they told me they actually heard back from the local PD where Angelica lived. She'd been a missing person since 1999. Her parents offered a reward and everything. They never found her. No clues. One night she was in her room listening to music on the computer. In the morning, she was gone without a trace. I was so shocked I had to sit down. Maybe it was a prank, but then what if it was her? Wouldn't her family want to know? Maybe she'd had a psychotic break or something. What's this stuff about the hole, and what about the blank email address? I didn't have a clue. The police were no help with these questions, and I was pulled back in. I decided to go looking for any contacts I could remember from the time when I was speaking with Angelica. Anyone who would have known both me and her. We had a few mutual contacts, mostly people from the web ring, but also people we introduced to each other. Just not many I remembered by their real names. Actually, none. There was one guy. He went by the handle Rapscallion42. He was an odd guy, into hacking and anarchy, the good, clean internet taboos we had back then. He'd been on the net forever, since the days of bulletin board systems. That guy, if he was still around, he'd probably still be going by the same username. So I got to searching. Not only could I not find any trace of Rapscallion42, I couldn't find any Rapscallion at all. He was all over the web in the day, so that in itself was weird, like someone scrubbed any trace of him. That's when I got the idea to go dig out my old computer. It was an old 1998 HP running Windows 98. I had it stashed in the basement since I went to college. It would have at least all my old contacts stored just where I left them, if it would even load. I had to wait 5 minutes for it to boot up. Then I got the Ethernet cable plugged in. It was like it'd just been in sleep mode for 2 decades. And there we were. My desktop icons for IRC, ICQ, Netscape, and even Napster. Napster. I learned there was more to music than the radio from Napster. Some good memories. Honestly, I wasn't sure ICQ would load. I believe ICQ still exists in some form, but I just doubted their servers would still accommodate the old software. One of the key features of ICQ that made it so ahead of its time was that, besides being the only instant messenger, it also allowed offline messaging. I mention that because not only did ICQ load, but it loaded with a message. That perturbed me a little bit because it's like it was just waiting for me, knowing I'd booted up. Except for one detail. The message was dated November 1999. It was from Angelica, so it had to have been sent right before she disappeared. It just said, "You coming?" It sent a shiver down my spine. Where was she going? Could I have helped her if I'd seen it in time? Why'd she act like I knew? Even weirder is that I'm sure I'd been on ICQ after November 1999. I'd say I used it up until 2001 or so. That's when I went to college. It was like the message was trapped in the server all that time, and I was only getting it now.